Hello, y'all. We back.
Hey.
This is our third class of the day. I'm so glad we're not on African time. Okay, I see people are still here. Cheriss, oh my goodness, I'm so excited for today's. But before I do all that, I'll let Danielle do the housekeeping.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Come back. I think what time is it for y'all? Because I see we still have 2 minutes, but maybe.
It's 1 on my end.
Oh, it's 1. Uh-oh. Is my clock slow? Okay, well, let's just jump right in then. If you are newly joining, just drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. We love to see where y'all are coming in from. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Somehow, some way, I will. You can just see the slides, right? Okay, cool. So yeah, I know probably several of you were in the classes prior to this, but if you're new, we are going to go through, as Polly said, housekeeping stuff. So if you've been here for the past 1 or 2 classes, you can go take an extra break, go get an extra shot of coffee or whatever it is, or stick around to just hear us, keep repeating how awesome the Essentials is. So welcome again to the Essentials, which are free online classes about navigating the photojournalism industry, made in partnership with grassroots photo organizations, working toward inclusivity, equity, and access in the media, all of the good and necessary things. And those organizations are the Everyday Projects, Black Women Photographers, and Photo Wings. The Everyday Projects is a global community of visual storytellers, so from documentary photographers to journalists, artists, and more, all committed to using imagery to combat harmful misperceptions and to rise above persistent inequality. As a nonprofit, we work to provide opportunities for our global community and to provide structure, support, and direction for the diverse and worldwide range of everyday photography groups and beyond, because so many of you joining us today are, not a member of the Everyday Projects or Black Women Photographers. So we're so glad to have you here today. Please learn more about our groups and how you can get involved. With that, Polly can take it away. My amazing co-host, Polly Irungu. So happy to be here with you.
I'm so happy to be here as well. Like, I couldn't think of a better way to spend my weekend. If it wasn't hanging out with you, it'd be going to brunch with Cheriss. So I'm really I'm really excited to be back in the swing of things with y'all. So Black Women Photographers, for those who may not know, is an organization I started in July of 2020, providing free opportunities and resources to our global community of over 1,200 members and counting in 50 other countries. And yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this. This is our 3rd season of the Essentials. For those who may not know, we did 2 seasons prior to this with jam-packed classes. I think there's like 12 classes or in total or something, but if you go to our respective websites, you can go and check back those classes. They're available in English, Spanish, and French. And even if you miss the 2 sessions right now that just occurred earlier today, you can also replay those later this week in other subtitles. And so, Danielle mentioned that this is free. And how do we make this free for everyone? By having an incredible sponsor called Photo Wings. Photo Wings, thank you so much, y'all, for your generosity and making this, essential classes free for this community. Tuned in right now. So Photo Wings, if you do not know, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to utilizing the power of photography to further deep thinking, communication, and action. Their extensive online content and Photo Wings outreach programs have myriad educational applications and possibilities. And so thank you all so much again for making this weekend summit free for our communities.
Yes, and once again, I am Danielle Villasana, co-host of The Essentials with the amazing Polly. I'm also an independent photojournalist with a passion for community development and education. So the Essentials, this is like totally my jam. I'm here for this type of stuff. You can see some of my colleagues' names here too, who are helping with behind the scenes stuff. Thank you to Rebecca Gibeon and Austin Merrill, who is in the audience and who, along with Peter DeCampo, are the co-founders of the Everyday Projects. On that note, y'all are gonna hear me keep talking about how I'm so happy to be here with Polly. I'm such a fangirl. I've been wanting to host the Essentials with her forever. So I feel like this is like my version of Saturday brunch with y'all. But anyways, I want you all to please take note of these ways that you can support Black women photographers. Polly is single-handedly, I know she also has support, but Polly is just amazing. Really making it happen for Black creatives around the world. So please consider making a donation that supports their initiatives and operations. Yeah, did y'all know she was from Kansas? Like what? And she's like photographing. Yeah, Polly, anyways, y'all should follow Polly. Hey, we need to share our handles too, I think, Polly, because y'all should definitely be following Polly if you're not already. And Cheriss, we are going to get to you, I promise, but we also have Cheriss May here. But before we jump in with Cheriss and talk about how amazing Cheriss is, I think Polly's got a couple more things to go over in the housekeeping.
Yes, again, if you were here for the first two classes, you already heard all this, but please, for those who haven't, we have some incredible instructors who are making space in their very busy schedules. We had Hannah just joining us earlier from Paris, Annie, who just finished, 12 weeks of chemo, joining us, and now Cheriss. We have incredible instructors who are giving us their time, their expertise, all for free, no gatekeeping in here for you all, for you can further advance your practices. So please check them out if you haven't already. We have all their bios and information, their links, their handles on our respective websites where you can, learn more about them and follow them throughout their journeys. And there you can follow our organizations, Everyday Projects, Black Women Photographers, and of course, Photo Wings.
Yeah, and I think, Polly, you've mentioned already the recordings will also be on the websites, but just while we're here, I also want to mention that Photo Wings also has a very large archive of great videos on all facets of photography. So please make sure to check those out too. Great library of content. And before we get started, at the end of Cheriss's class, we're going to jump into a separate Zoom link for our meet and greet, where you can meet other photographers, get to know one another, share those editor emails, all that good stuff, practice what we've been talking about here. And we, like I said, we'll be dropping that link throughout the day. So just keep an eye out for that. It'll be in the chat. It's already in the Q&A. Just keep your eye on those places. And without further ado, let's get started.
Yes, so you talk about how you fangirl me. I fangirl Cheriss every time I see her. I'm so excited for having Cheriss May here. I'm just gonna read her bio. That is very humble, just like the other previous bios. Everyone here just has a very humble bio, but Cheriss is a lauded portrait photographer and adjunct professor at her alma mater, Howard University. Cheriss's work centers on the intersectionality of race, culture, and politics, from the White House to Capitol Hill and everyday life in communities across the country. She's a frequent contributor to the New York Times and has also been published in other organizations such as O Magazine, which is Oprah's magazine, People, ABC News, The Today Show, among many others. Her work is featured in the permanent collection of the African American Museum in Philadelphia and the Schomburg, I totally butchered that, sorry, Center for Research and Black Culture in Harlem. Cheriss, thank you so much for making space today to talk about something that, as photographers, as many who are freelancers who may have been self-taught, like myself included, may not have learned this, but it's so important. Ethics. Yes, I will let you take it away.
complicated with all the odds we're facing for once. We just need love. Together we can make it. No room for confrontation or lie. It can't get done. We just have to do it. We can start the movement today. No time to waste. We'll be okay. We just gotta make it right. If we don't love each other, then we ain't gonna make it. If I don't treat you like my brother, then I'm just mistaken. If we just come together, can nobody be there? What if we had one mind? To be better, we can come together right now. It's all up to you.
Yes, you have to like applause to that. Yeah,
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So thank you, Polly, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to Danielle. And thank you to everyone who's joined, everyone who's on here and who's going to look at it later. But I am going to talk today about do no harm ethics in photojournalism. So let's look at the definition of ethics. Moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. Moral principles are subjective and have a lot to do with your upbringing, experiences, and values. This is me as a little girl with my dad and my brother. My mom is actually taking the picture. That's why you don't see her. And you see me with the camera in my hand. This is actually on the DC Metro. Little did I know that I would be calling DC my home when I grew up. Who you are, your values, and your ethics is determined by your upbringing. You heard my introduction, you saw some of my work, but who am I? This is the Kansas City, Missouri skyline. So Polly knows this, being from Kansas, but I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. My name is Cheriss May, and I was born and raised in this conservative town called Kansas City in Missouri, not Kansas, but on the Missouri side. This is me and my brother. And as a little girl, I can remember skateboarding, riding bikes, playing kickball, and catching fireflies with my friends, playing tag and running home when the street lights came on. My whole block was like a family, and we looked out for each other. But when I was 8 years old, my family moved away for better opportunities, and we moved into a suburb of Kansas City called Lee Summit, Missouri. It is here where, when my brother and I were riding the bus home from school, that we were first called the N-word. My first introduction to racism. My parents had to have the talk with us on the history of racism and how to navigate in a world that would see the color of our skin first. My parents raised us to move forward in spite of, to not be crippled by the hate and the challenges, to work hard, to do our best, learn more, work harder, and to just keep moving forward. I remember as a little girl loving all things creative. I love to draw, I love to paint, I love to color. I love music. I remember always having a camera in my hand, taking pictures at family celebrations and events, excited to get the film developed so I could see what I created. Each Christmas holiday, my parents upgraded my camera. They saw my love for photography and they upgraded my camera each year. And my love for storytelling continued to grow. So this is a piece of my campus where I went to high school called St. Teresa's Academy. This is my aunt on the left-hand side. St. Teresa's Academy is an all-girls Catholic high school, predominantly white. And years later, my aunt is actually the current president of St. Teresa's Academy. So we've come a long way in making that progress. But I can remember in high school taking photography as an elective, made the little shoebox camera where you put the little pinhole in there and develop the film. And I remember having fun with photography then, and my love for photography continued to grow. And it became more of a love for storytelling, not just photographing. So I went on, chose to go on to college and decided to come to the Howard University in Washington, D.C. HU, you know, those who know, you see it on my sweatshirt. But we have our, it's actually our homecoming next week. So if you've never been to a historically Black college and university or HBCU homecoming, you are missing out. It's like a big family reunion where everyone just comes together. This is the yard on our campus. And so next week, you won't hear a thing from me. The yard will be lit and everything will be in full swing for this big family reunion. It was at HU where I was immersed in my history and culture. Howard gave me that confidence and that understanding that I come from a long lineage of inventors, leaders, survivors, and advocates for equity and justice. I started my career in journalism as a graphic designer for a few newspapers. And during that time, I was a part-time photographer and an adjunct professor at Howard University. I've been a full-time photojournalist for about 10 years now. Key ethical questions. So these are some things to think about when we think about ethics in photojournalism. How do I respect the dignity of the people I am photographing? What is my responsibility to people? Do I have a responsibility to my audience? Who's viewing your work? Who's reading the stories? Who are you speaking to? The most powerful images are those where you are in conversation with those you're photographing. A conversation isn't one-sided, and it's best when you take time to just listen. Not overtalk, not try to force your own views, but to give people space to be their authentic selves. After the murder of George Floyd here in the US in 2020, there was an awakening, a reckoning on race and justice, with uprisings happening around the world, really. You could see a shift in how journalists covered stories. There were questions of consent to photograph people, and communities became more vocal on what they would and they would not accept in the use of their image. Is it legal to take a photo of someone in public? It is generally accepted that there is a common law right to take a photograph in a public place or in a private place where the public are admitted, subject to the terms of entry to that particular place. Any photos taken in public, which is considered any place where people have no reasonable expectation of privacy, not needing permission doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for permission first. I was working for the New York Times on this particular day covering a protest in DC. And I had a conversation with my editor beforehand, and she specifically asked me to try to get consent whenever possible. Not meaning to get photo releases from people, but to ask when photographing them. I saw these three women from a distance, and I lifted my camera up and motioned as if to ask, can I take your photo? Can I photograph you? They nodded yes, and I made my way closer to talk to them and got this photograph. Another instance where I motioned with my camera and got this family's consent. I'm sensitive to photographing children. I don't want to take advantage of that. In these images, I spoke to the parents and had permission to photograph them. This photo I saw from a distance, and I was drawn to the conversation and connection between what it looked to be a mom and her son. I photographed them, and then I moved closer to talk to them. And I asked the mom for her permission to publish. She actually signed a photo release for this photo, giving me that permission. If you're from, some may be familiar, some may not, but there's an organization called the National Press Photographers Association. And that really was my start to really looking at this code of ethics for photojournalism, for photojournalists. So I'm going to share those with you. It's available on their website, so you don't have to write this down if you want to go back and look over it. One note I will make, or I will say, is on this code of ethics, they use the word subject. And I'm just going to replace that with people, because I try to be cognizant of wording and things that I say, because I believe in the power of words. I'm not perfect, and I may, slip into some of those things, but I try to stay away from subject, take, when talking about photographing someone, because all of those, to me, you're not in conversation with this person. You're just taking from them, getting what you can get, but without any kind of thinking about the humanity of it or the ethics. Be accurate and comprehensive in the representation of people. Resist being manipulated by staged photo opportunities. Now, I'm talking about photojournalism. This will be different if you are setting up a posed photo or a portrait that you're doing. Be complete and provide context when photographing or recording people. Avoid stereotyping individuals and groups. Recognize and work to avoid presenting one's own biases in the work. Treat all people with respect and dignity. Give special consideration to vulnerable people and compassion to victims of crime or tragedy. Intrude on private moments of grief only when the public has an overriding and justifiable need to see. While photographing people, do not intentionally contribute to, alter, or seek to alter or influence events. Editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic images, content, and context. Do not manipulate images or add or alter sound in any way that can mislead viewers or misrepresent people. Do not pay sources or people or reward them materially for information or participation. Do not accept gifts, favors, or do not engage in harassing behavior of colleagues, subordinates, or people, and maintain the highest standards of behavior in all professional interactions. Why do photography ethics matter? Think about, are we causing harm? Are we deceiving? Are we jeopardizing the integrity of the industry? If we make pictures that harm people, they will not want to be photographed. If we manipulate our photos, we deceive, and no one will trust us. If we're not ethical in how we use photography, we risk jeopardizing the integrity of the industry. How many of us have been questioned based on a bad experience someone had with another photographer? It doesn't matter if you were involved or not, you will be held to standards or denied based on their past experience. If you're mindful and more thoughtful in your approach and in your conversation with people, ethics goes a long way to positively impact the world beyond our lens. Images are powerful as they shape how we view the world. It informs people about communities they are unfamiliar with. It's an enormous responsibility and an incredible privilege and opportunity to have meaningful conversations that can have a positive impact on the world that we all live in. Powerful images are a reflection of who we are, what we see, and what we feel, good, bad, and indifferent. On January 6, 2021, I was on assignment for Getty Images to cover the ceremonial vote count for president at the US Capitol. It started out just like any other day. I start and end my day with prayer for protection, prayer to see and hear what I need to see and hear, and to connect with people and things that will tell the most authentic story. I went in early on this particular day when the halls were still quiet, before staff and Congress people arrived. And I remember family and friends reaching out to me, sending me messages, saying that they were praying for my safety and to be careful. With me telling them, I'll be fine, I'll be inside the Capitol, nothing ever happens here. We all know what happened later that day. I found myself with the staff of Congressman Clyburn barricaded in his office. From a window in that office, I photographed the line where the inauguration of President Joe Biden was to take place days later. Hearing the flashbangs, seeing the smoke, people waving Trump 2020 flags and destroying the press stand. What felt like a day was closer to 2 hours in that office, with insurrectionist attempts to come into the office, ending in SWAT and Capitol Police breaking in the door to get us out of the Capitol. I went back the next day to retrieve my things that I had to leave behind the night before. And I came back to non-scalable fencing that was surrounding the Capitol. They were just putting that up. I came through a door to go inside, seeing zip ties fashioned in a noose hanging from the door, the smell of urine and muddy shoe prints on the marble floors and boarded up window frames. National Guard had temporarily moved into the Capitol to keep it secure in preparation for the inauguration. The streets of DC were lined with National Guard, police, and it was important to cover this time with truth and integrity. People needed to know what was going on. See me, hear me. When I'm out with my camera, people will approach me. I don't know about you, other photographers who are on here, but people will approach me and ask me to take their picture. It's not really just about being photographed. It's more about wanting to be seen, heard, and understood. It's about having a conversation, showing compassion and your willingness to listen. These experiences show me the need for diverse stories and storytellers. People need to see themselves in the full story, not just at times of unrest or negative stories. When stories are one-sided, especially when skewed, there's a part of society that feels subordinate and misrepresented. This is 5-year-old Gary Dion Allen, and I met him in Oklahoma I was there to cover the commemoration of the race massacre, the 100-year commemoration. And Gary came up to me and he tapped me and he asked me, will you take my picture? And I said, sure. And he threw his arms open wide and smiled. And this is the photo that was created. When you make a connection to the soul of people, you allow them to be their authentic self. Representation matters. I first started covering the White House during the second Obama administration term. I would often see them invite kids in who lived a few miles away, but had never been inside. I could see how powerful that this was in the kids' eyes, and they were able to stand next to world leaders who looked like them, shake their hand, hug them even, and make a connection, allowing them to reach beyond a what if to a reality of I can. They would tell kids, this is your house. You can be president too. One of my favorite images, which you can see over my shoulder as well, on the screen and over my shoulder, is this one of Michelle Obama that I took, and I call it Hidden Figures. Former First Lady Michelle Obama was hosting a screening of the movie Hidden Figures, and so she had invited military families to screen the movie. And after the movie, she had the cast and the director from the movie to come, and they spoke on the film and the making of it. And so before her introduction, she started talking about how it wasn't lost on her that as a first lady and a Black woman in the White House, that there were hidden figures that built the White House. And this was just such a powerful moment that I was able to connect with. One day I had a portrait assignment at the US Capitol. I had just parked my car and I was grabbing my gear out, and a woman approached me. And she said, excuse me, Miss, do you work here? As she was pointing towards the Capitol. I answered yes. She called over a little Black boy. He looked like he was about 7 years old. And she says, see, I told you Black people do work there. I said, yes, they do. And you can too if you want to. Representation matters. I was blessed with the opportunity to document the White House announcement of the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for the next justice of the US Senate, US Supreme Court. I also covered the Senate confirmation hearings for Judge Jackson. To be able to tell this story, to document this historical moment, was special for me as a Black woman. I have felt the weight of scrutiny, even when I've done what's required to attain the credentials needed to do the work. I found myself on that last day that Judge Jackson testified, shooting through tears as I connected with the emotion in that room. It's not lost on me that this was a historical nomination, and that me having the opportunity to tell this story, what it means to little kids like that little Black boy who didn't believe that Black people worked at the Capitol. Representation matters. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Now, I said earlier, I believe in the power of words. You really have to be careful in what you say, because words can become thoughts and thoughts become actions. So in all of this, you should tell your story. What things are important to you, to your community? What stories are not being told? What's falling by the wayside? What about those stories where people want to be seen? They want to be heard. Tell your story. I want to give a special thanks to Gordon Campbell for the use of his music in my video from his album Conversations, and a special thanks to the Everyday Projects, the Black Women Photographers, Photo Wings, Polly and Danielle, and you, all of you who have joined. We can stay connected. Here's my information, which I think they'll put in the chat as well, but I want to open it now for your questions. I would love to hear if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to speak on. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheriss. Oh my goodness, that was so powerful. Like, Cheriss is such a great storyteller. every time, I'm just like, oh, yeah. I learned something new every time. So thank you so much for that thoughtful presentation. We do have some great questions coming in. Danielle, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, definitely. Cheriss, I also hope you have some time to peek at the chat. People were just going like so wild for your pictures as you were sharing them. So everyone's very moved by your work and your words. Even people were like, what song is that? We need to know.
Well, so I told you in the end. Yeah.
You did, because you're
like Gordon Campbell.
Yeah. Of course you would. This is a class about ethics. Awesome. So I love how you started off talking about how ethics, are really tied a lot to your upbringing and how that's tied to bias, right? Because sometimes when we think about ethics, we think it's a black or white thing. I mean, you mentioned some black or white like facts about ethics, like not paying people, to create an image with them in it. But I was wondering if you could kind of delve a little bit more into what are some, what's some advice that you can give people to check their own biases? Because sometimes that's hard when we have to kind of look at ourselves, and make sure like, how can people keep themselves in check in terms of, making sure they're not creating work that upholds stereotypes? Because, I think it's something that, people are, we're continuously evolving and all of that. So yeah, any advice you have on, how to keep ourselves in check, basically, with the work we're creating.
Right. And that's a great question. And that's something that I strive to do myself. And honestly, a lot of that is just spending time outside of your sphere of influence, your community, what you're used to, what's normal for you, what's comfortable. And it's actually spending time in the uncomfortable and getting to know other people, exploring other cultures, stepping outside of, just your circle and stepping into something that's unfamiliar or with people that you may not know. Because a lot of times we tend to, even if you look at like different networking events, a lot of times people tend to hang with those people that they know. And I challenge myself in those situations to actually go and talk to people that I don't know. And in that, when you do that, when you step outside of your known and your comfort, then you get to get familiar with something that's unfamiliar to you. And it actually causes you to think about being more inclusive and not being so, I'm just going to take care of this little circle here, but I'm going to look outside of that.
Yeah, definitely. That feeling of uncomfortability, is that a word that I just made up? Is something that we just, to be better, to do better, we have to be uncomfortable, right? Like, it's all about.
You have to get comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so real uncomfortable.
I don't like it. I don't want to. No, but ultimately, I mean, ultimately, like you said, it's going to make you a better photographer. It's going to make your images better.
Most definitely. It will make you a better storyteller for sure. Because then you have a more rich experience and you're open. What it does is it makes you open to listen. You know, a lot of times we have like these preconceived notions and views, and sometimes we project that, you know, when we're out there with our cameras and with our pens. But if you do that, then it will kind of make you have this internal conversation to say, you know what, let me think about this. Let me look at this, or maybe I should, you know, do this or try this.
Definitely. Polly, I think I cut you off. I think you were gonna.
Oh no. It's totally fine. I was just gonna say that just reminded me of what Cheriss said in our summit in March. She was one of the speakers, and I'll never forget, you said, "Do it scared," and that really just stuck with me, and I replay that all the time in my head. So going back to the questions, there's this great one in the Q&A box that I was just looking at. In general, and more specifically during the protests, I made a habit of asking permission before photographing people while documenting. Many individuals and families who accepted also inquired about seeing or receiving the photos. I'm very curious how you or other photojournalists, you know, handle that situation. Since I'm not associated with any press or media, I tend to give them my contact info, but I rarely end up going back and sending them the photos due to time. You know, you mentioned, as all of those who are on and will watch us later have probably been stopped, you know, like you have your camera, people naturally stop you. How do you deal with that? Do you handle those what do you do with those type of requests?
Yeah, great question. So what I do is, and this all depends, like, am I self-assigned? Was I out there myself? Or am I there working for a particular, you know, media outlet or something? If I'm working for someone, you typically, what I do is I tell them, I'm working for the New York Times today. So the story should be out tomorrow or whenever, you know, I was told that story is going to be out. You can check out the story there. Here's my contact information if you want to follow up later, because what happens is, if you have the rights, and this is another thing, I don't know if this was talked about earlier, but copyright. So if you have the copyright, but there may be an embargo if you work for a particular you know, news outlet or publication, then once that embargo is over, you know, if that person comes to you after that, then it's up to you, you know, whether you say, you know, here you go, and, you know, send that photo to them or send them a print or something like that. So it all depends on, I think the question that you were saying, this person said they weren't assigned, they were just kind of out there themselves. Mm-hmm. So I will give people my contact information, like my email or my Instagram or Twitter. And sometimes they will follow up. And sometimes I'll tell them, you know, look, I'm working for, you know, XYZ, and the story has to come out first, but, you know, give me a week or so and, you know, connect back, and then I can follow up with you.
And along those same lines, there's another question here. You know, you mentioned about the power of words. When people come to you and ask you to take their photos, do you ever ask them what their story is, or do you let that come through on its own in the photo?
I talk to them, and typically, like, if someone is coming up to me like that, they tell me their story. Like, all you have to do is like stay there for a minute, you know, don't just like, you know, create the photo and then just walk away, but actually take your time. If you do have the time, you know, you might be on assignment for something, but if you have the time, it's good to just like stay there, you know, for a minute. Now, I will admit, some people will talk your head off. Like, they'll tell their story and then they want to tell their mom's story and their dad's story and the cousin's story, and you got to like cut it off at some point. But at least give some time to listen, because what I was saying before is, it's not about them asking you take my picture, but it's more of they want to be seen, they want to be heard. they want to tell their story.
On the flip side of that, when people approach you, I'm one who, Annie said this in the previous class, tries to see the good, right? So I would try to assume the best of the person, like if someone's approaching me, but like, how do you protect yourself when you're out in the field? Like, you can't assume that everybody has good intentions, that they're just coming to talk to you to share their story, especially when you're maybe working in hostile environments or working, like you shared the story how January 6th started as a typical day, and then everything else followed. So how do you protect yourself?
Yeah, and that's a great question. For me, like, I'm spiritual. So again, I start and end my day with prayer. Secondly, when you're out there, you have friends and colleagues who are also out there, and we look out for each other. So especially during those times where there are a lot of the uprisings and it got like really dangerous and hostile and violent, even like from all sides, like you could get it from any side. We looked out for each other. And then you have to have situational awareness in those instances. Like, you can't just be consumed like with your head down. You have to like be aware, look at your surroundings. You can kind of see like movements that are happening, or if you hear like aggressive, speaking or hurriedness, you have to pay attention to like different signals that'll tell you like something's about to happen. You need to get out of the area. You need to remove yourself out of this particular thing. And also what I try to do is not back myself in a corner. So I try not to position myself where I have no movement all around me. Like, I don't want my back up against the wall where I can't move and I'm just trapped, if something happens. Because I've seen it too many times where people get trampled and, different things. When something happens, something erupts, and then you just have, people running and panicking, and, people get trampled if you're not aware of that. So number one is, if you have the opportunity to have, people out there that you can check in with. And what we would do is we would set up these like Signal and WhatsApp groups, and we would check in like periodically through the day, like, hey, I'm okay, I'm over here. Hey, I'm over here now. And we would let each other know too, like, I'm back in my car, I'm leaving, I'm on my way. Or so that what happens is, if you don't hear for someone for an extended amount of time, you're reaching out like, where are you? You good? You okay? And that's, even if I'm working for an outlet, I'm out there on assignment, this is not self-assignment, I still do that. I still have that. I have friends and colleagues who are out there, and we look out for each other. We tell each other, we give each other like tips and things like, hey, there's a crowd coming from this street, coming over, be careful, or don't go over here, this is going on. So it's good to have a network that is out there, that you're looking out for each other. If you're out there by yourself, just have that situational awareness and try not to position yourself where you have no ways out. I think about the other day, I was driving in to work, and on this particular street, and it's a one-way street. And I never really thought about it before. It's a one-way street. There are cars parked on both sides of the street. And I didn't think about this till the other day. I was there, and I just hear boom, 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 boom. And it was like rapid fire, like gunfire. Immediately you could tell it was gunfire. Then I heard a woman scream on the end. So I'm on this one-way street. There's cars in front of me. There's cars behind me. And so then I'm signaling for the car behind me to back up, and they're not moving. So I had to get out of my car and yell, back up, gunfire. And so they were like, oh. And so then they started to back up, and we were able to back up off of the one-way street. But what it made me think about is situational awareness and not putting myself in a position where I don't have a way out. So then what I did was, I was like, you know what? I need to change the way that I'm going, stay off of those streets where it's just a one narrow lane where I have no room to turn around, and I just can only back up, those one-way things. and I changed my route. But that happens, like sometimes when you're, you may be out doing something that you may discover like, okay, this may not be the safest. If I'm thinking ahead, like just trying to be careful, I may need some place where I have an outlet and I can get out.
So important. And for those, I've said this a few times in the earlier sessions, in the last season of Essentials, we actually did a pretty intense, safety training with this other organization where they give us, just risk safety assessment, apps to use, what not to do, what to do, things to carry just in case. All of that is, again, available on replay on our respective websites. I'm gonna ask another question and I'll turn to Danielle to ask the other great questions that have been coming in. This person says, I've been wondering for too long how to best represent the Latin community. There's too much context or info of a location or activity. I'm afraid that I will compromise them or their safety since lots of them are undocumented. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Do you have any pointers or thoughts to consider?
I have actually worked on some stories where I've done what's called anonymous portraits. And in those, I'm taking the portraits that you can't identify the person in a way where you can't see their face or certain things that may, make them identifiable. You do it in such a way where nobody would know who it is. And in that way, those particular stories, talked about some important critical information. They were able to share their story without having their face, shown in that. So it sounds like even in that, like maybe you could get someone who agrees to, or maybe more than one person, to tell their story and that you would do something like that. And in that situation, what I did was, when I created the first portrait, I shared it with them just to show them, you want them to be comfortable in that. And since this person is like, I want to share my story, but I just don't want people harassing me, like when it comes out. They can't know who I am. So in that, I showed them in the back of my camera, like, this is what I'm doing. And they were like, thank you. And thank you for doing this. Thank you for respecting me on this. And then from there, the trust was there. And so I was able to continue to create some other portraits because they trusted that I would take that same care. So it sounds like that's something that you may want to consider, is to, show them what you're, because we're visual people. So if you show them, what's in your mind or, your idea, then maybe they would agree to telling their story.
Yes, trust, so important. And, a lot of what you're talking about is it has to be genuine and authentic, right? And it has to be intentional, because when it's not, it just, it's like, I don't know, creating something on sand, it has nothing to hold it with. So much of what you're sharing us with today are some tangible, concrete ways that, if you're an unethical person, at least, no, I'm kidding. You can write these down and make sure you're doing it. I'm joking.
No, but I mean, you make a point though, Danielle, because to me, like, being ethical, putting humanity first, you gain so much more by doing that. And to me, it makes a stronger story because you have a stronger connection. You have this trust that the people feel like, you're not just here to take from them or to be this helicopter journalist that's just coming in to get what they need and then leave. And then you don't hear from them or see them, like, you don't hear from them or see from them before or after. And then the story comes out and they're like, oh my God, what is this? They feel so betrayed. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that we have to pay for some past doings, photographers who don't take that care, who may not be thinking about ethics or humanity. Then, you'll come along and they'll be like, no, I'm not doing it. I got burned before. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Just that, what did you say earlier? Yes, what is my responsibility to people? You know,
Yeah.
that's such an important question. And yeah, it's such an important question to know how you would answer and think about. But another kind of really difficult question, I think, that would love to hear how you navigate this. You know, I think as photojournalists, we really, you know, choose this path, this career, because we want to do good, we want to create positive change, we want to raise awareness about issues, you know, that communities and people are facing. So how do you navigate? And I think this is something a lot of people sort of grapple with. I mean, I certainly did and do still. How do you navigate the area of the fact that we make a living doing this? And someone sort of asked a similar question, but, you know, like, for example, you know, when say a photograph is in an exhibition and you get money from that photo. I mean, how do we navigate those sort of uncomfortable feelings of making a living, being able to support ourselves off of the work that we do?
Yeah. For me, a lot of times what I do is get photo releases. And if you're honest with people, you know, a lot of times, like I've had, you know, a situation where actually one of the photos that I shared of the man holding words are powerful, actions are supreme. That was one where there was a campaign for BET that they wanted to use that photo for it. And I circled back to him because that's the thing too, it's really good to, somebody else had asked this question, we talked about it earlier in terms of people contacting you after. If you are able to, it really is good to get people's contact information. Because what happened for me in that particular situation is I was able to reach out to him and say, hey, BET is running this campaign on social justice, and they love that photo that I created of you, you know, holding the sign. Are you okay with them using that photo? And he said, yeah, sure. And I said, well, can you sign this release? Sent him the release and he signed it. So you can do that. I know there are some photographers who actually, they will have people do releases even like not knowing that they may do something, you know, down the line for it, but they feel like it's such a powerful image that it probably would be, you know, it may be used in something or shared in a campaign, social justice or something like that. And so they automatically will get releases. The photo that I had of the mom with her son, it was one of those where I felt like it was just so beautiful and powerful that I asked her to sign a release. And I told her, you know, and the thing is, just be honest with people. And I think people really appreciate when you're honest and they don't feel like you're trying to do something behind their back or you're shady or things like that. But honesty will go a long way. So I told her ahead of time what I was thinking. I said, you know what, I would love to, I'm thinking of an exhibit, like doing an exhibit and having this image as a part of an exhibit. Would you be okay with that? And if so, would you sign this release? And so she was like, yeah, sure. Like, I trust you in that. So I give you my permission. And she signed the release. So a lot of it is, Danielle, just being honest with people with your intentions. And you had said that before, and that is a big thing of being intentional. And in that, when we talk about ethics, you know, integrity, you know, goes in there, and just being honest.
Yeah, which is like sometimes, and Polly, sorry, I will just have a little follow-up thought, and then I think we've got, yeah, at least like 10, 15 more minutes of questions. So I'll try to keep it short. But gosh, what was I gonna say? Oh no. Oh God, intention. Oh geez. Oh gosh, there, I just talked too much and I forgot. It'll come back to me.
It'll come back.
It always comes back.
It's gonna come back. When it comes back, I'm gonna unmute. Oh God, what was it? It was so important. Oh, okay. It's gonna come back to me. Polly.
Just being honest and integrity.
Yes. Thank you. Annie in the previous class had mentioned, you know, asking questions to the editor about assignments and stuff. And I'm so glad you talked about being honest just now, because I think sometimes we fear as photojournalists, like, oh, if we're honest, like if we're too honest, like, oh, they're like, they're not going to want to be part of the story, and it's such an important story, and maybe I should just kind of like, maybe just, you know, can I take your picture and leave it at that if they say yes. But I 100% like agree, like it's so important to be honest. And a lot of times like those honest conversations are going to open up to, like you said, so much richer storytelling, potential things that you may have never even thought to ask, because
Right.
now you like have a genuine exchange and relationship with these people. So yeah, don't be afraid to be honest, because sometimes we're afraid, I think, to kind of like talk too much.
Yeah, it goes a long way. And what I find is when you open up that communication, and like I was saying earlier about having these like genuine connections and conversations with people, they stay in touch. And a lot of times they'll follow up and they'll say, hey, I'm doing this now, I'm working on this, or I heard about this. And they'll give you leads on things. You know what I'm saying? Like there have been instances where there was like an action that was going to happen. And I get this late night text, like there's going to be an action at 6 o'clock in the morning. Come to this address, you know, that kind of thing. So when you open up that communication and you're honest and you work from a place of being ethical, you know, in things, like you can gain so much more versus getting that one-off, like, I'm going to do this anyway, even though like everything is against it. I'm going to push through and do it because this is what I want to do. And it's going to make the story, like, it ends up like you might get that one story, but you've burned like anything else that comes from that person, that community. You know, you may get a reputation. You know, I was at one march one time, and one of the speakers there had pulled me to the side and was complaining about another photographer, saying that they didn't respect their wishes of not photographing their daughters. And so they said, I didn't give them permission to photograph my daughters, and they did it anyway. And then they tried to talk to my daughters, like step over me to talk to them to get their names and information. I was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like enough of coming in our communities and just doing what you want to do. And she was like, no, I don't agree to this. I don't consent. And it's something that I think, especially like around the time of all the uprisings after the murder of George Floyd, people in communities that felt like they were getting the short end of the stick and being burned on stories and this helicopter journalism, they started to be more aware and started to be their own advocates on things like that. And they were starting to say no, like no. Or they would say like, you know what? I give you permission. I give you permission, not not them. Because they come in here and do that all the time, that stuff all the time, and enough is enough. Like, so I'll give you permission. So it became a thing, like, and I'm sure, Polly, you heard of this with the, you know, this is around the time with Black women photographers was like really doing a lot, advocating for photographers. And it became a thing of, now you have publications and editors who weren't really calling, you know, Black and brown photographers of color for things. Now it was like, hey, hello, like, you want to work with us? Like, come over here. Because what was happening was we were the gateway to the community, because, you know, they started to say no to things, but yes to someone that looked like them and that they felt comfortable, that wouldn't take advantage, that then they had to come and say, can you do this story over here? Can you go to this community? Can you go to this event? And there was more conversation, more interaction. So that kind of was like an awakening, I think, with that. But to be honest with you, what happened, what I kind of thought would happen, then it just went back to business as usual. Like once it like went there for a little bit, and it was like business as usual. Like we're back to what where we are. But I've always been a big advocate of diverse stories and storytellers, and to me, like it just makes it more rich, and it brings people into a way of looking at something that's not the same every single time.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna hold my thoughts to ask these questions. So many great questions that we'll try to squeeze through in the next few minutes before our meet and greet networking session. This person, on a similar note, says, speaking of biases, as you mentioned, background is important to shaping our worldview and the insights we have into communities we facilitate storytelling with. I am from Parkland, and for those who may not know, Parkland is a high school here in the States in Florida. There was a massacre, a school shooting at. This person asks, how do you grapple with just being a part of the community you're in, and newsrooms, their favorite word, objectivity, who may think that you're too close to the story. So, this person is from Parkland, they're a part of the community, a community that now, has a mistrust with press because of how, like, Danielle and you have mentioned how reporters can parachute in, parachute out. But when the headlines stop, those people are still there, it's their community, they're still dealing with everything, even till this day. So how do you deal with that? Have you ever felt that you were too close to something? Were you too close to the protests? How would you answer that?
And sorry, I am don't have self-control like Polly. To piggyback off of that, I would also like, have you ever been in a situation where you had to have those conversations with an editor, and how did you navigate that?
Great question.
Okay, so I guess I feel the opposite. Like, I don't feel like it's being too close, but I feel like it's a connection that will give you another layer in telling that story. We always talk about being objective, but if we're going to be honest, there's always some level of subjectivity to it. If we're human, so there's no way you could just like turn everything off and be robotic and not have like a single solitary thought about what you're seeing, what you're witnessing and what you're documenting. I think the difference is not that you don't have, certain views or feel a certain way about something, but it's in being fair in how you put it out there, how you document. And to me, it's about being fair in how you listen, even when it's something that you may not agree with, but yet it's something like that needs to be told, like it needs to be put out there. When I was covering the White House during the Obama administration, and then we went from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, and some people were saying, man, like, you're still covering the White House? I thought you wouldn't cover it, like, during Trump. And it's like, people still need to know what's going on. We need to see what's going on. We need to hear. We need like honest reporting, and, people who are going to think about the ethics and integrity. Just because it's something you may not agree with doesn't mean that it still doesn't need to be told. And if it's something that you're close to, like, a person was saying they're from Parkland, to me, that conversation would be, I'm a part of this community, so I can have conversations, and I have connections to people that would not talk to anyone else. So I can provide a deeper conversation. I can provide a different layer, to this that will add to the story. And that's part of, Danielle, the conversations that I may have with editors. I remember telling a particular editor, this was like during the height of the uprisings. And for me, it was like really personal to me as a Black woman. What was going on, what I was witnessing, what people were telling me, what I was seeing. And so I told this editor, like, I need to cover this for myself, and I can't cover it for you. And I just want to be honest with you on that. Like, this is like deeply personal to me, and it means a lot to me as a person outside of any work. And so, you know, I'm doing this story for me. And if you have an editor, a publication who can appreciate that, to me, that is somebody who, you know, really cares more about the story and not so much about just getting what they need as a company or a publication. And if it's not an editor or a publication that will be understanding of something like that, then maybe that's someone you don't want to work with.
Yes. Oh man, y'all. I'm sorry. I was like, I keep nodding my head like I'm in church. I'm sorry. There are a few more questions. I know we're like at time. I'm just gonna try and squeeze through these last few questions. You know, you mentioned how you get consent while, you know, you're out there in the field photographing people. And you mentioned release forms. Do you have your own release form? What is included? Does that release form, you know, mention anything about like, you know, compensation, like you won't be compensated or whatever the case? Like,
Yeah.
how do you navigate that?
Great question.
Do you have any resources for a person can, you know, have a good release form that will cover all the bases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So certain publications will have you, they have release forms that they ask you to, you know, to have people sign. Like I know Nat Geo will do it, you know, for some things, AARP, and they have their own forms that they need you to get, you know, people to sign. If you're self-assigned, you're working on a personal project or story for yourself, there is an app I have on my phone called Easy Release. And you can download it and people can sign it like right on your phone or your iPad on there. And Polly, it does go into like the compensation thing. It will say that. You can also like customize it so that, you know, if it's something like, if you're working on like a commercial campaign, then there should be compensation. So there's different uses, there's different ones you can choose based on the usage.
Amazing. Let me look at the last few questions.
I know a question.
Okay, go ahead.
This is more of like that question where we're just all sort of like, it's like a fangirl question. Like we
Yes,
just want
that's what I was gonna ask.
that's you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's two. One, I just want to know, like we've talked a lot about ethics and safety and stuff, but you're talking about photographing some of the most historic moments in, you know, US history, you know, the photograph of Michelle Obama, you're at the White House, insurrection, maybe not the insurrection for this particular comment, but like, how do you keep your cool in front of all these like, important, you know, amazing people, you know, the Supreme Court justice. So yeah, how do you keep your cool around all these, you know, amazing, famous people? And then someone also asked, can you tell us a bit about what it's like to teach the next generation of storytellers at Howard University? So those are more just like, Cheriss, we just want to know more about you.
It's funny. You know what is so interesting? Like a lot of times I just get into a zone in those instances, and I'm so focused on getting the story or not missing the moment that my focus is there. So my fangirl is like in the back, like takes a back seat. And then what happens is after it's done, it's like, dang, like I was really there. Or I really had a conversation, you know, my moment with Maya Angelou, I was like, dang, I really like, we were talking, we had a moment. And she said, it was a pleasure to meet me. Like, yo, like when I'm there in the moment, I'm in a zone, I'm focused. But then after that moment, I'm like, dang, like you look back, like, whatever. What was the other question? It was a question, I feel like, after that.
Yeah, there was like another part to that, like, when you're in, for those who may not know how it works, like, photographing, like at the White House, there's a thing called a press pool. So you're in a pool with other photographers from different outlets, and you're not the only one in the room. So how do you actually like make sure you get that moment, and like do you be aggressive? Like, did you ever have to like fight for your spot? Like,
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And then I think they had another part to that too.
Anybody that I think like probably DC, New York, probably LA, like any major city, like around the world, like any major place where you have, a pool of photographers, you have a ton of photographers, and we're all, trying to connect at this particular event or moment. There is some aggression that happens. You have, one of my mentors, Fred Watkins, it still plays in my head sometimes when I'm in those moments. He told me, he said, you belong there just as much as the other person or anyone else there. You go there, you do what you're there to do, and don't let them push you out of your position or your spot. Because people who have been in those, they know that there can be like some physical pushing that goes on there. There can be, some words and some aggressions and, things like that. And you do have to like stand your ground in that when you know that, okay, I'm not doing anything outside of the norm of what can be done, here. And so you have to like be aware of that and just kind of stand in that confidence of, I'm here to do work just as the person next to the left and the right of me, behind me, in front of me, have to do. And as Polly was saying, like when you're involved in like these press pools, like you have like certain areas, like you can be in this area behind the rope line, and you can't go outside of this. So you try to find positions and ways to get what you connect to, what you need to connect to. With that Michelle Obama photo that's over my shoulder, with that particular one, to me, like when you're able to connect to these powerful moments, you have to be very aware of mood, body language, you're listening. This particular time, I could feel and I could hear that this was going to be an emotional moment for her. And so in that, I surveyed like where I was able to go, within that room, and I positioned myself to what I thought would be the best position to connect to that. Now, I will say, sometimes you will make that gamble of, okay, I'm going to be right here. This is going to be the spot. And sometimes it's not the spot. It is not the spot. You get burned. And it's like, dang, like I should have been on the left and I'm on the right, or I should have been here. Because you never know at any given time, like you can kind of sometimes look at things like, well, this person normally like turns to their left. When they speak, they always turn to their right. But it could be that particular day, they turn to the opposite side. So you just have to be prepared to pivot. You have to be prepared to just kind of, move as best that you can. And a lot of times you do things and ask questions later. Sometimes it may be something like you're really not supposed to do, but you do it, get it real quick, get yelled at, and be like, okay, but you got it. So it's kind of, you have to just stay aware and try to prepare as best you can. And with the pushing, again, just know that you belong. You're there to do a job, you're there to do something, and just stand firm in that, because I had situations where it was like foreign press that were coming to the White House. And, the press pool there at the White House has like a system of how things go and the order of things. But when you have another press corps come in that aren't used to that, then there's some confusion, in that. And I, one time had something where, what they call preset. So this is when you're able to go ahead of the event and you're able to put something in a space. You get your space. I got my space. I'm gonna put my step stool here, or my ladder here. This is my space. So then when you come back out for the event, your space is there. So this particular time, it was like a state visit, and I had my space. So I'm like confident, like, okay, I don't have to rush out there or do this jockeying for position. Like I already have my position. When I get out there, I see one of the photographers from the pool from the country that came was moving my stuff like out of the space and like standing in my space. So I go up to him, and it's a man. And sometimes you get that thing of, I will say as a woman, sometimes male aggression that will try things. And so he moved it, and I go up and I'm like, excuse me, this is my space. And he was like, no. And I said, yes. And he said, no again. I said, sir, like, please move. That was my space. You just moved, my monopod, from there or whatever. And he was like, no. So I had to physically like elbow him out of the way and get my, position back. And I mean, he honestly like really locked down on me, where I had to really like kind of nudge him with a little bit more force. It wasn't so, but like once I did that and got my space, he was like, fine. He didn't say anything after that. And, maybe that's what he's used to. He's used to being in those pools, and that's how they, that's how they work or whatever. So again, it just goes back to just knowing that you belong. You're there to do a job just as the people around you, and just stand firm in that.
Amazing. And we missed one question. We're definitely at time. This has been like so awesome, like this conversation with you. It's just, yeah, like, oh, you talk about this all day, and ethics are just so important. Like, yeah, not to mention, there's a lot of things we've talked about, but not to mention if you mess up ethically, like that could be the absolute end of your career. So this is so important. But the one thing that we didn't hear from you is, what is it like to teach the next generation of storytellers in a few words?
Yeah. So right now I'm on sabbatical, but I will say, like, when I'm teaching, that I just try to encourage my students to realize the power of their voice. And so my class that I was teaching is about visual storytelling. And so what I want to do is to come in and, have those students be able to become more sure of themselves and how they communicate and how they're telling their stories, and to be confident in telling their own stories. Like I asked them, just as I said earlier, like, what's important to you and what's important to your community? Because nobody's going to tell that story better than you are. And you're going to tell it in a different way that it hasn't been told before. So just to help them to become confident and more sure of their voice is what I aim to do.
Danielle, don't hate me. I have one more question. I did this last time. I know we're late for our networking session. But Cheriss, you started your presentation with the powerful slides of your work, and also some quotes and the music. But at the beginning, there was a slide that said, do no harm. How have you, been influenced by like the rise of social media when you think about ethics? And when you think about maybe, like, for example, in 2020 here in the United States, at the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of the protest images, went viral on social media, right? They just spread like wildfire, no photo credit, nothing like of that sort, no context. It was just the photos, and you just had to assume or track down the source. And there was a lot of conversations about the fact that, the protesters' faces were being seen, police, FBI were tracking protesters, putting them on lists. And, in return, that was, resulting in harm to those who were protesting. So how have you, thought about social media when you are, out there documenting, these historical moments? Has it influenced how you thought about ethics in any way?
Well, I try to look at what I'm posting on social, even though I may have some things that, there are some photos that I won't share on social media. And I'm just trying to be cognizant of being respectful, in that, because there are some things, for certain stories or, something that I may get that I just will not put on social, because I know how social media is, how people can reshare things or screenshot it to share, even if you have have it private or limited or something like that. So it goes to people's personal ethics and, what you feel like is based on your values and your morals, like humane, right, and, being of integrity.
100%. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Cherie.
for sure.
Oh,
Thank
it was
you
so
all.
good.
Thank you so much, everyone that came, your questions in the chat and everything. And again, I think they shared my contact information. So feel free, if I didn't get to your question, to hit me up. And, it may take me a few days, depending on what I'm doing, to get back to it. But, I will get to it, or just prod me. But, give me a few days. But I definitely try to, go through and answer people's questions that reach out, about certain things.
Thank you, Cheriss. Thank you so much.
Danielle, thank you, Polly.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna go through some quick last housekeeping things, as Polly and I always do now. I hope y'all got this all memorized by now, but Polly, you want to get us started?
Yes, so that just wrapped up today's the essentials. 3 incredible classes, jam-packed with information. I know some folks were taking notes. Some people were asking, will this be recorded? They're trying to be present. Yes, everything has been recorded. It'll be available in Spanish, English, and French later for you to replay as many times as you want. We had some incredible instructors today, and that will continue this tomorrow as well, with more incredible instructors, a lot more information to get to. Again, everything will be recorded. I believe we're starting at the same time tomorrow. And if you already RSVP because you're here, I'm pretty sure you are also good to go for tomorrow. If you have folks that should be in here that haven't, signed up yet, it's not too late to register, so they can also make it out to tomorrow's sessions. A lot to cover. Today we covered a lot, so I know some folks will have to process, myself included, everything that we covered today, from ethics to just pitching from the photographer's perspective. And so much. I don't know, what was your favorite part, Danielle? Oh my goodness. I don't know, my head is just but I love seeing people's tweets and IG posts with their takeaways. So if you have any takeaways you want to share, feel free to post, feel free to go tag the instructors, connect with them, follow up with them. Cheriss just said she has an open door, just give her some grace. So, continue to reach out to folks, reach out to us as well. And, soon you're about to reach out to the fellow visual storytellers and make some new friends within this industry and build your community. So I hope I will see a lot of you in the meet and greet that will take place literally in 2 minutes as soon as I stop talking. So go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, Polly, we're great / horrible together. We can't contain our excitement for all these amazing speakers and questions, and everyone for joining us and just adding to the rich conversation. As Polly said, social media. So here's all of our handles again, the Everyday Projects Black Women Photographers Photo Wings. Again, huge round of applause. Massive thank you to our partner Photo Wings, also who makes this possible by sponsoring the essentials. Seriously, we wouldn't be here without Photo Wings. So thank you. Thanks again to all of the folks at the Everyday Projects who have been helping behind the scenes, and to the one and only Holly Irungu, again, the founder of Black Women Photographers. So if you missed it before, or if you didn't and have already, why not again? Give a little support to Black Women Photographers and the amazing work Holly is doing to uplift the voices of Black creatives all around the world. And these are a couple ways you can do that, through Venmo or Cash App. Any donation, small or big, is welcome. So yeah, with that, we are going to jump into, thank you so much again, Cheriss. I don't know if I've said it a million times, but yeah, just like so much wisdom, and thank you for being here. Thanks again to Annie and Hannah, and we're so excited for the teachers tomorrow. I'm just gonna one more time drop that link, and then please, everyone join us for the meet and greet. So this is the meet and greet link. We're gonna literally go into that Zoom room right now where we can see each other, say hello, meet one another. And then again, the webinar link for tomorrow, which we're also gonna send in an email, is this. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you, Cheriss. Yes.